Right, so greetings, hello, welcome world and friends. Philosophy Club here in La Creuse, Sunday evening, what's not to like. It's getting lighter in the evenings. We're now on the 4th of May, which is, magical.
May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th, yeah, very important day. And yeah, so I like this time of year because it's coming up to my birthday in 4 days, 8th of May. And ever since I was a young boy, I remember this time of year. The excitement of coming birthday. And also it was the cricket season. I always used to play cricket at school. And that was fun just for the civilised nature of cricket, actually. This is why in politics I really don't like the way the world's going. They're not playing by any kind of rules of decency at the moment, as I'll come to in a minute. And so, yes, it was. I think it's my favourite season of the year. I mean, not that I don't love all the others, but and the May blossom is out and all the rest of it. And here we have these wonderful local birds twittering around. I think they're house martins. They kind of come from Africa and take over the village, and they're very beautiful. Chatty. So anyway, so what's been happening this week that I want to share? Well, I want to start with what happened on Monday, which was Canada went to the polls. I spoke about this briefly last week, but Canada did what I was praying for. It elected a moderate government, Conservative, lost, who initially had been very much trumpeting Trump. This chap, who's actually from Calgary, where I lived for 3 years in Alberta, and he seems a bit lost intellectually. Poilievre, he was called, and he wasn't convincing to the voters, so we voted for the other guy, Mark Carney, who is a moderate, decent chap, who was the governor of the Bank of England for many years, and who knows how to run an economy, and he's intelligent enough to see through the nonsense and bravado of Trump, tariff world, and all his craziness. So I think Carney's a really good choice, and I wish him well as a new Prime Minister. Well, he's now been confirmed. He was serving Prime Minister, but now he's elected Prime Minister. So I wish him well. And I did actually go to the trouble of getting my vote in Canada sent, because I feel this is an important election. And all Canadian citizens, whether you live in Canada or outside, should vote for it. It arrived too late for my vote to actually register, just to say, but I would have voted for Carney. And so that was quite, emotional, really, that Canadians did the decent thing, so thank you very much. The other thing I want to say is we had a very good meeting on the 30th of April for my World Intellectual Wisdom Forum and IPSCIP, which meet once every other month now. It's a sort of and we had a very interesting meeting with lots of people from different parts of the world. We're a very international group, as usual, meeting. We had a full agenda. We were discussing Ukraine, Russia, and the Middle East. We were discussing one of our colleagues, Professor Glenn Martin from Virginia, was talking about his plan for a World Parliament that they're setting up in this meeting in Pondicherry in December. So we're discussing how you get elected to that. It's going to be partly online in India, partly in person in India, partly on Zoom. So, and this is a project I've been watching for the last 20 years. The World Constitution and Parliament Association. It has a world constitution that was took a lot of time and effort by many leading people to design. It's a sort of world parliament. Their argument is that the nation states of the world, as long as they control the monopoly of power and decision making, we won't get the problem solved on the planet, because nation states can be taken over by mobs, by gangsters, by criminals, as we've seen, and they can do what they want because they're sovereign. So as long as the myth of the sovereign nation continues, there's no hope for humanity, because this is the argument. So we need a multinational sovereign parliament which would have actual authority over the heads of the nation states. The UN doesn't have that. It's a club run by and for the nations who can veto and prevent it actually doing anything. So the UN has been toothless in preventing Israel's genocide in Gaza, although it has named that as such through the International Court of Justice, and it's been toothless in preventing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. UN, I've spoken twice in the UN headquarters, and I love the UN. It's the best thing we've got. But what this project is saying is we need something a bit more teeth. Now, how we get there, I mean, it's very idealistic, and I've known Glenn Martin, the president of this project, for years. How do we get there from here, and how would we get rogue nations to cede their sovereignty? I can't see Israel doing that immediately. I can't see Russia wanting to do that. I can't see China doing it. I can't see Trump's America doing it. They've whipped up through the takeover of the media this sort of anti-globalist rhetoric, which is against any kind of multinationalism or internationalism. How do we get around that? It's as if, let's take an analogy, we're a ship on the ocean, and different parts of the crew are all having like an anarchy going on in their particular parts of the ship, doing their own thing, and there's no one overall in charge, and different people are fighting on the bridge to steer the ship in different directions. They're shooting each other. They're blowing up people they don't like in the engine room, So somebody somewhere has to be responsible and take over the captaincy of this ship, because it's at the moment, the multinational corporations working solely for profit are doing their own thing, people like Musk and so on. So anyway, that's the challenge that we're looking at. We discussed that at this important meeting of the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum, which is a group of intellectuals trying to grapple with these huge existential problems. We also heard from my friend Amina Siddiqui from California. She was joining us from San Francisco, talking about her project that she helps is to get a US Institute of Peace, well, actually a Ministry of Peace at cabinet level, because it would deal with like domestic violence, gun violence, domestic, violence against women and all that kind of stuff. America is quite a violent country, and it's getting worse, it seems to me. So they've been working on that. She spoke very movingly. We had Shabin Kutay joining us from Kashmir. She spoke about this recent attack by some unknown faction shooting at tourists, purportedly Muslims, but there's no actual proof of that. I've not seen any convincing evidence as to who did this or why. It seems to me it's also possibly a false flag thing to whip up anti-Islamic hatred in the right-wing Hindu community, which is appalling, but we live in a world where these things are possible. I suspend judgment. My job as an academic is simply suspending judgment till the evidence comes in. We had Dr. Mishra come from India. He's a leading radiologist, a scientist. He spoke about the hope for humanity is in science, he said. We need people of reason to look at ways of helping solve these problems one by applying scientific method. And he talked particularly about, climate change, global warming. These are scientific problems. Could be solved if only we attend to them. George Mutalema joined us from Africa. He's the secretary of the Catholic Universities of Africa, which is quite a few of them, based in Tanzania. And we talked about the death of the Pope. He was actually in Rome last year, George, with his university association, and actually met Pope Francis. He was there giving a talk to them about why universities matter, why they're important. and they should have a moral component in their work, said Pope Francis, and I agree 100%. So I run the Global Green University as a small private university for the ethical side of global a positive transformation towards a peaceful, sustainable world. So yes, and then we had Sean English, Dr. Sean English from Ireland, speaking about his work with the Irish peace movement, and they're very keen not to see Ireland become a militarised state, joining NATO and all this stuff. Now, I'm proud of Ireland. It's always stayed out of, it's neutral, technically, by the law, by the constitution of the Republic of Ireland. I think that should stay that. And but I also think they should do more to help peacemaking and mediation. So there should be a Ministry of Peacemaking in Ireland, in Dublin, and they should be pressurising the EU to give them funding to make that work. Because they're an interesting and unique European Union member, which is not in NATO, and that voice is important. They should be doing more effective peacemaking, in my opinion. So anyway, that was just a glimpse of some of what we talked about at that meeting. There were other things, but it was good. It was recorded. It'll be on the YouTube channel eventually. So the next thing I want to share is about the main work I've been doing for the last few months is this commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, right? And I can today officially announce, today it is over. I finished it today.
You did.
As in, like, I did the last page of proofreading.
The last full stop.
Yeah. I mean, now I just have to, like, typeset it and publish it. That'll take a day or two. It's always fiddly. But the text is now pretty much complete. It's got something like 450 footnotes, all of them, excruciatingly detailed, and it's quite an epic work, I've decided. I've reviewed all the other commentaries on the Gospel of Matthew that I can find, looked into them. I can assure you there's nothing ever been written quite like this, because it includes all the esoteric history of Christianity. It includes all the Gnostic Gospels that were excluded from the canon. I go into why. I still think Matthew is a great Gospel. I really admire it. It doesn't tell the whole story. No Gospel does. There are four main ones, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. They all tell it from a different angle, and I've done commentaries on each of them, but this is the first to be published. And I've done it in time for my birthday. It's a reverse birthday present. I'm going to give it away to my family and friends. And then, so I did a lot of research on. I've long treasured this dream. If I were, and it's not going to happen, is it? But if I were elected the Archbishop of Canterbury, in charge of the Anglican Communion, I would reissue the King James Bible in a new edition, and I would include in it would be quite a big volume, I'd have all the excluded texts in there, like the Gospels of Thomas and Mary Magdalene, and the so-called Apocrypha, which I've included references to in this commentary. For instance, the Gospel of Nicodemus, which is sometimes called the Act of Pilate, which is, again, a witness testimony to what happened at the crucifixion. Why did Pilate cave in and have Jesus sentenced and killed? Nicodemus was a disciple of Jesus in the Sanhedrin, an important guy, a Jewish guy. He was a secret disciple of Jesus. And he's left this gospel. Why isn't that in the Bible? Because it gives lots of details. And then there's the amazing Gospel of St. Peter. What? What Gospel of St. Peter? Well, we've got a copy of the Gospel of Peter, and he also gives testimony about what happened at the tomb, when they found the empty tomb. How did the resurrection happen? And this text should also be in the Bible, in my opinion. I've also gone into the text before Matthew, because Matthew starts, with the birth of Jesus. it doesn't give you any backstory. Who are Mary and Joseph? Where did they come from? There's nothing in Matthew. There's nothing in any of the Gospels. But we have this text called the Proto-Evangelium, which should be in the Bible. And it tells the story of Jesus' parents, Joseph and Mary, and who they were and what their history was. And most important, it also tells the story of Mary's parents. Who were they? Joachim and Anna. And it gives their whole story, which explains the context of the gospel story. In a nutshell, Mary was a young girl sworn by her parents who had her late, like in theirs, probably Anna was in her early 50s, late 40s. Joachim was probably 10 years older, and they had no children. They didn't think they were going to have any children. They wanted one. They prayed and prayed, and they said, okay, we make a deal with God. If you give us a child, we will dedicate him or her to God and to the temple in Jerusalem. They lived in Sepphoris up in Galilee, which I've been to. And miraculously, she conceived. Anna had this child, which turned out to be a baby daughter, called Mary. And then they kept their word, and they dedicated her to be brought up after about the age of 3 to the temple in Jerusalem. And the temple had these virgins, they're called, because they were young girls who would do the kind of, helping run the temple behind the scenes, cleaning up, keeping the oil lamps burning, lighting the incense, all that stuff. And that's where Mary lived for her first 10 years of life. Now, it's all in the text, and it seems to be factually the case. Now, it explains why, Jesus was quite so religious. His mother was a temple virgin and lived and breathed the whole hopes of the Jewish people. She was literate, she read the prophets, they were studying away, and they were hoping for a Messiah who would save the land from all the troubles that were besetting it. And I think that explains a lot about Jesus' own mentality growing up as a boy. So anyway, I've gone into all this in the commentary in enormous detail, 450 footnotes, and what I'm surprised at is nobody else has done this before. I'm not a Christian vicar, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a professor of divinity at Oxford. I have friends that are all those things. Why haven't any of them done it? I don't understand. Is it, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not any of those things. I'm just an academic historian of ideas, quote unquote. I'm able to look at the whole range of source material and bring it all to bear on the commentary on St. Matthew's Gospel, which is breaking new ground. If I was a vicar, I could be sacked for heresy. If I was a professor of theology at Oxford, I'd be said, no, you can't draw on all those resources, that's ridiculous. For instance, I draw on there was commentary or lectures given by Rudolf Steiner, an esoteric Christian, in 1911, who gave a whole series of lectures on the Gospel of Matthew. And I discovered them when I worked as librarian at Steiner House in London years ago. Now, Steiner was a theosophist and an esoteric Christian who said that you can use your clairvoyant powers to see what was happening then. Now, that's not accepted by normal historians. Like doing clairvoyance is not part of your training as a historian. But a lot of anthroposophists think that he got some things right. I'm prepared to look at the evidence. I'm not going to condemn it out of hand. And my good friend Sir George Trevelyan, who was a member of the Anthroposophical Society, was one of many people that thought Steiner's work was worth looking at. Another one was Owen Barfield, who was a member of the Inklings in Oxford, and a great intellectual friend of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. They were part of a sort of thinking club, a bit like a philosophy club in Oxford. And so anyway, these things are worth looking at, and I've been able to draw them all into the commentary. So that's exciting. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. I've discovered a lot of very interesting things that I think no other commentator has ever put together in one package. I think it's time for the truth. about who Jesus was, where he came from, what he was trying to do, where he might have been educated, what he meant by the Sermon on the Mount, what he meant by the Beatitudes, I've gone into all that. So anyway, you'll be able to get a copy within a week or two. The other thing I've talked about is, the other thing I want to report is, yes, religion is quite contentious, particularly in the USA at the moment. I don't know if people are aware, but this President Trump, who really breaks all the rules of what a president is supposed to be behaving at, he's issuing these executive orders which are basically giving him totalitarian powers. He can issue executive order, that DAFA should not be allowed on any public airwaves and silenced or whatever. He just makes them up, and he's issued one at the moment giving him total control of what is Christianity. So he's done it in the form of an executive order which gives him the right to define what is anti-Christian. So the idea of freedom of religion, which is central to the American Constitution, has just gone out the window, because if I'm a different kind of Christian, let's say I'm an anthroposophist or a Druid Christian or something, now I can receive a hit squad from the American secret police, which will arrest me under this executive order and say you're being anti-Christian. And of course, by defining what is anti-Christian, you're also defining that what Christianity is. So what the good news is, a whole bunch of church leaders in Wisconsin and elsewhere, Lutheran bishops no less, have written a protest. They've said this is breaking the entire constitutional code of America, which separates church and state. There's no power that the president can have. He can write all the executive orders he wants, but he doesn't have that fundamental right to define what is a Christian or any other religion. Let's say he brings in an order defining what is anti-Jewish, or that's not up to him. It's up to the rabbis, and it's up to the bishops and the Christian theologians to define what is a Christian. And there's a whole variety of them. There's Catholics and Protestants and all the rest, and long may they flourish. My commentary on Matthew is for all of them to look at intelligently. So anyway, well done to the Wisconsin churches, but I just don't know how we've got here, and I don't know how we can get out of this nonsense with this president who thinks that is within his remit. It's shocking. I mean, I think it's also a good sign, because it means that he wants to control people's thinking, because he realizes thinking is important, and therefore silencing people.
He just doesn't know how.
Well, no, he hasn't. I mean, he's trying to get Musk to put chips in us so that we could be silenced from a switchboard somewhere, But arresting that particular Christian leader in the Capitol building for praying again, that was done under this executive order. They now have the right to stop you if you're praying in the wrong way, because that's anti-Christian. So they're defining what a Christian can and can't pray about. Well, this is just unbelievable, absolutely shocking, and I just, So the other thing I want to report is we've also just had an English local council election in the country of England, part of the UK. We voted for local councils. It wasn't, nationally, for MPs and stuff. And so I did help man the phones. You see, as a democratic activist, I believe we have to step up and actually do our bit. So on the day of the election, what we do, Liberal Democrats and other parties, is we phone around people in seats where we think we have a chance and we want to encourage the vote to come out. So I did that, and I spoke to some people, and that was very interesting. Thank you very much. So I'm a Liberal Democrat, as in it's a moderate left-centre party that believes in common sense, decency, rule of law. The British Constitution should be adhered to and respected, and law should be. And we are against Brexit. We're against the fanatical right-wing Reform Party. We're against the Conservative Party that have taken us down this dangerous route. And a lot of decent, moderate Conservatives now vote for the Liberal Democrats, appalled at what happened with Brexit. So I can report we did extremely well in this election. There were thousands of us volunteering and so on. And we now are the leading party in Wiltshire, which is a county I know and love well. I used to teach in Caen at St Mary's School. And it's where Bowood House is, where Joseph Priestley discovered oxygen. And the journal of the girls at St Mary's School is called Oxygen. And Jeremy Bentham, one of the founders of liberalism, used to go there. He was a friend of people that ran the place, and they're still there, the family. So there's a good liberal tradition to draw on in Wiltshire. And as the kind of founder of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Stonehenge, we believe it should be the right of Druids and stuff to go and do prayers in their temple. And so that's good news. The Liberal Democrats are now, the dominant political force. The Tories have been defeated in Wiltshire. They're no longer running the council. And the same in Gloucestershire and other parts of England. So, yeah, so I just want to report on that. I mean, the rise of reform is worrying. It's being bought and paid for with blood money from overseas. Its finances are completely opaque. What we were calling for is a complete ban on foreign money buying into British politics. We know that Musk offered millions, if not billions, to Nigel Farage to buy money to print election leaflets to land on every doorstep. And, but the Labour Party, for reasons that are to do with, intellectual sclerosis, didn't pass that legislation. So reform had been flooded with foreign money, and basically you can buy votes. This is a new form of old-fashioned corruption. When the Liberals ran the country in the 1830s, we passed the Great Reform Act, which forbade corruption. In the old days, you would just go outside the polling booth and say, anyone going to vote for us? Here, tenner each. In those days, £10 was a lot of money. So £10, prove you voted for me. And that's how the Tories used to stitch up elections. Then the Liberals passed a law outlawing all that. But effectively, we've got to be vigilant, because that's what's happening now. If you let unlimited money come into your country to bolster a party, I mean, you can take over through running the media, the printing press, the social media and so on. You can buy power now. So this is a huge problem, and that's what Reform has done. Who are they? Well, they are extreme right activists. They're in league with the AfD in Germany, who are sort of Hitlerite apologists, whose big idea was to send all immigrants home, arrest them all, exactly like Doge is doing. They share the same thinking as Musk. And Musk, of course, is a great supporter of the AfD as well as Reform.
He's South African bugger.
He's a South African apartheid guy. And I'm appalled that, what happened to Mandela and his heritage? Musk stands for everything that Mandela was, against. Well, I'm with Mandela and the Rainbow tradition, and as was the Liberal Party in South Africa. I had friends who were involved with that. So, yeah. So so there's another. I want to say one other thing before we move on. I discovered a very interesting thinker this week called Dr. Karl Lowenstein, who was a German political scientist, active between the wars, who did his PhD and everything in political science, and he watched the rise of fascism and Hitlerism in Germany, and he said, hey, this is a problem, because what was happening was extreme right anti-democratic ideologies, which is what Nazism and fascism were using democracy and its liberal values, you can stand in elections, we're open, that's right, freedom of speech. It was using the kind of perks of the democratic state to infiltrate it and then to seize power, having masqueraded and pretended to be a democratic force. Once you get power, you then abolish democracy, which is what Hitler did. And Lowenstein saw all this happening in front of his eyes, and he was intelligent enough to see what was happening. And he said, look, this is a new thing, right? These aren't old-fashioned type thug, people that we can see and see off. No, these are guys pretending to be Democrats, stealing power from within. And he blew the whistle. He actually had to flee. He went to America in the end because he was Jewish and German Jews were being rounded up and killed. He made it to the States and became a professor of political science there, and then published a lot of stuff about this. And he's been rediscovered by contemporary American political scientists who are saying, hey, that's what's
happening today.
That's what's happening today. That's what the Republicans are doing. They've been captured by fascist elements, Nazi elements actually, who are masquerading as Democrats, and then they're capturing power and they're shutting down democracy. And so I don't know. I think Lowenstein has got some of the answers there. I'm going to be researching him. But it is, I'm a great lover of political science, and I studied it as part of my degree, and I think we have to get our act together. And as intellectuals and philosophers, we have to stand up against it, this misuse of democracy. So that's really a little report back on this week. I mean, it's never a dull moment, is it? And I'm listening to a beautiful talking book. I just want to give this shout out by a lovely British woman writer called Caro Giles, who lives in Northumberland, called 12 Moons. And I recommend people to read it. It's only just been published, and it's a year of her life. She's a single mother with 4 young girls, living on the moors of Northumberland, which I know and love, and the struggles of daily life, being a single mum, not much money, the husband gone off, for reasons that she hasn't explained yet, and just struggling to keep everything together. And I think why this book is so important is she's speaking for millions of people, millions of young women struggling as single mums, without enough money to really bring her kids up as she'd like. And why can't we help those people instead of funding the weapons of war, instead of doing extreme right stuff like, oh, that's all because the immigrants are here, so let's export them all. The racists have no answer to this. They're just a weapon of fear, not coming from love, but coming from the opposite. And so it's like a report from the frontier of what it's like living in Britain today, which it's difficult, it's tough, especially if you're a single mother. So thank you, Caro, for writing that courageous book. And she's also loves the moon, the full moon, which I do too. So it's a sign of hope in dark times. Right, okay, that's my little summary. Any comments, questions?
No, it's amazing to see what the Americans believe about Europe. That all our media is controlled. And that's exactly what I understand they are doing over there.
You mean this guy Vance coming and complaining?
Yeah, Vance and also Musk, Elon Musk.
Sure. Who's bought one of the big social media channels just so he can spread his rants and things. I mean, it's the American. I personally, I've never accepted the use of America to describe the USA. I mean, as a Canadian, I'm also an American.
Yeah.
And he was an Italian. Amerigo de Vespucci was somebody who worked for the Medicis in Florence. And there's a great film to be made about the Medicis and Amerigo and the birth of America.